Hi, I'm Chantelle with 141 Design Company, and let's create this sign together. This paint palette is a brand new item in our shop. I put it together for my stitch that I'd done a while back, Create Every Day. This stitch is actually a free pattern you can find at Fat Quarter Shop, and it is by Teresa Kogut. I've stitched mine on 14 count Aida, and it is mounted on press-on board. I used a glue gun to mount that in the back. The board itself is 9 by 3 3/4, and this is the size scale you'll find if you're stitching it on 14 count. It would be smaller and fit if you stitch in a higher count. The floss I used was DMC Colors. We'll go through each one and let you know the numbers. The red is 347. Then we have 597, 760, 725, 703 for the green, 311 for the blue of Everyday, and 04 was what I used for the needle. We'll set these aside so we can match them up to our watercolor pencils later. The board that has been cut mimics that of a paint palette. There are 2 layers to it, and it is cut from our maple product. You will also receive this chip brush to add as an embellishment to your design. There are 2 pieces. The top layer has the holes cut out to reveal the color for your palette, and your base board, also done out of maple, has the lasered circles here so that you know exactly where to apply your color. Those will be invisible once you put the top on. Today we're going to use the watercolor pencils by Tim Holtz in order to put the color on. There are 3 different packs in his collection. To choose the colors, we're going to go off of our DMC palette and pick colors that are similar to it. We'll start with a black and maybe find a good gray in here somewhere for that second spot. There we go. We'll keep that side neutral. Then we'll move on to some red. Oh, maybe an aqua would be good. Pink will be nice right here. I found that on the first one I put a couple colors together that were a little too similar, so they blended. So I'm kind of mixing them up a little bit more this time. We've got our yellow and green and blue and an orange. We'll set those aside and begin coloring. I'm going to speed that up so you can watch me color. Now that we have all of our colors in place, it's time to activate them. Like I said, these are watercolor pencils, so I've got a dish of water in my paintbrush. I'll dip a little in, and I'm going to blot that off, I guess, soon, so it's not so much water. But see how that is blending, and it doesn't look so colored anymore, more like a stain or watercolor. And we'll just go over the black. I'm going to use the stain pad that I have for later, but I'm going to blot the water off. Our gray disappears a little bit. We may need to add a little more to that later, but we'll let it dry first to see. Our aqua might do the same thing. The lighter colors sometimes take a few coats to get them to really pop. Blend our red. Isn't that fun, the way the water just activates those? I really liked the look of this versus actually painting them, but painting the circles would be great too. You could use acrylic paints to come in here and choose, and then paint each circle. Once you put the top on, it's going to, you know, disguise and cover up anything that goes outside the lines. So you don't really need to be real careful here. I'm just being careful not to blend the colors together. You do not have to be exact within those lines. There we go. That looks great. Now, it will darken as that dries, so we'll set it aside so it can dry. And in the meantime, we'll take care of the top. Now, the application for the top is going to be done with this color wash tint I picked up at Hobby Lobby, color French Roast. It is water-based, so it will wash off your hands, but so that I don't get it all over everything as we move on, I'm going to go ahead and wear gloves. The stain pad I have here actually came with gloves, but I used some others that I had. And I did pick that up at Hobby Lobby as well. I'm just going to dump a little bit of that stain, which is the French Roast from the color wash. It's from Tattered Angels. And wipe it right onto the top of our surface on this top piece to the palette. I find that I like to put the stain on going with the grain. And I'm letting it be a little splotchy, because I want this to look more weathered, old, like it's been worn and touched and handled. Let's check on our paint. Things are drying fairly nicely, and I notice these two colors are very light, so we're just going to color them a little more. The sticks are solid color all the way through, and I'm not using very much. These will last quite a while. Try to touch up the screen a little bit, but I think it's a little too wet. It's still not quite dry. We'll do it again later. Let's blend those that we just added. That'll darken up better. That's nice. And our aqua. The red is good. All right. We forgot our paintbrush, so let's get that colored as well. And we're doing the same thing to the handle of the brush that we did with the wood. We're going to just color it with the watercolor pencil and then blend it with the water so that it paints the entire handle. Perfect. Our top is looking good. We're going to come in now with our sanding pad to distress these edges and sand some of this stain back, just like you would if it was painted. The stain sands very nicely as well, and it dries very quick, being a water-based stain. The Tattered Angel stains from Hobby Lobby come in a variety of colors. I've used their red, the yellow. They've got some great blues as well. And the small bottles are very convenient for these tiny projects. I will link in the description box where you can pick those up. We're also going to use some of my favorites, these Holtz ink pads. they're meant for rubber stamping, but I kind of like to use them for adding a little bit of grunge to the edges of my pieces. This black might be nice. Let's give it a try. It's a little dark, but we'll blend it later before it completely dries. I probably should have put those gloves on. This is messy stuff as well, but it sure does turn out nice. It's worth it. Worth the mess. This color isn't much of a color at all on this wood, but I find that it's a nice one to use to kind of as a blender. See how that's blending that black ink that I just put on? Leaving highlights or lowlights rather in certain areas. That looks pretty good. It's getting a little dry, so I'm actually going to just go ahead and add some water to the ink pad. You can see that my pad's getting a little bit worn out. I've been using this a lot, but I just keep using it since it's really just for wood and adding some depth to the pieces that I'm painting. I'm not using it for rubber stamping or anything, so eventually, I guess, if it completely dries up, I'll get a new one. They come in a pack, those tiny ones. But see how that just blended those paints? Let me put this on here so you can see it a little better. I like that dark edge over there on the handle area. Now I've got it all distressed after it dried. And you can see I've distressed a little bit more in some areas. But I was wondering if we came in here and added some of the color from the color pencils, the water pencils on the top, if it might start to add a little bit more depth to the top of it as well and look as if, you know, it's been painted and washed over and over, or used as a paint tool, I guess, is used as an actual paint palette and then washed off. So we're going to blend some of these colors on the palette a little bit more. We'll just go around each edge and then take the water and move the color around is basically what we're doing. The water is also activating the stain that is on the board, so that's also kind of moving a little bit, if that makes sense. We haven't glued it to the top, or glued the two pieces together yet. So I guess if something goes horribly wrong here, we can always sand it and stain it again. But so far, I kind of like the way the color is blending. It'll be very subtle. It won't be like real splotchy, but I like that idea of it, that it's going to just be some subtle color that shadows and shades each area. Oh yeah. And of course it's going to dry and blend a little bit. We'll let that fan and dry and see how it turns out. Now it's all dry. Look at how the color looks. Isn't that neat, the way it kind of blurred and blended and looks like there's been paint on there and it's been washed off and reused. Now we're going to put the two pieces together. I like to use Titebond's Quick and Thick Multi-Surface Glue. And we'll just add that to all of our little areas. Don't put it on real heavy. We don't want it to splooge out in the circles. So I'll even thin some of that out with my fingers. Get a little bit more on the corner or the ends and line it up. Press in the center, press on the edges. I run my fingers along the edge just to make sure that we've got a nice fit. And if you're going to leave it set, then let's make sure it's on a level surface so that the piece doesn't slide. Once the glue sets up, which is pretty quick, it's not going to come apart. So you don't want it to shift and come off. While we're waiting for that to dry, we'll clean up our toys. And I have got these all mixed up from using them over and over again, but I will tell you there's 3 different packs, and these are the different colors in each one. There's that set 2, set 1, and set 3. I just use different ones. The darker colors show up better on the wood. And there's our paintbrush with the blue handle that will give that a distress. Let's check this out. Now with this, I did dip that into some orange paint and let that dry. I don't think this blue is quite dark enough. Let's find a darker pencil and color that paintbrush again. That looks a little more tealy, a little darker blue, not bright, royal blue, but more of a teal blue, I guess I would call it. And that did the trick. Again, there's solid color all the way through that pencil. That's it. Much better. We're not going to paint that backside where the writing is because that's where we will glue it down to the board later when we put that together. Much better. There we go. I love it. Nice and finished. I'll just do a little more edging in here. I do like to sand. And there we have it. Create every day. Thanks so much for joining me as we put this paint palette together. It is available on our website and in our Etsy shop. This is the board we created tonight. You can see there are a few subtle differences. I need to put that paint on the end of my paintbrush there. I love the color, how it came around on the edges. That was a nice touch. This was an inspiration piece that I have. It's a vintage paint palette that I picked up at the antique mall. I just loved the patina and the paints on it. You could also paint your palette this way. But I think by adding that color on the outside, it mimicked it a little bit. A little more crafty look. If you enjoyed this tutorial, feel free to like and subscribe to my channel for more. If you hit the bell notification, you'll be notified as new tutorials are loaded.